Welcome to the deep dive. We're jumping straight in today with a pretty big question about, well, us, about human progress.
Yeah, it's this idea that progress happens on different tracks, doesn't it?
Exactly. Like, biologically, maybe we've sort of leveled off.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
Technologically, though, it's clearly full steam ahead.
But then there's the sociological side. Our societies, our interactions,
Hmm.
it often feels kind of stuck.
And the source material we're digging into today suggests a reason why. It points squarely at human misconduct.
Misconduct as the brake on
That's
progress.
the core idea, yeah. So for this deep dive, we're trying to use these sources to understand why it's so persistent.
And crucially, what the sources might suggest about a path forward towards something more enlightened for individuals and, society as a whole,
Right, and there's this paradox the source highlights right away.
which is.
Well, most of us find misconduct pretty awful, right?
Yeah.
Repugnant. And we've
Yeah.
got more information than ever before, like 38 million articles mentioned.
An incredible amount.
Yet we haven't managed to actually eliminate these problems.
So why not? What's the source's take on that?
It hints that maybe behavioral science hasn't quite seeped into public understanding effectively.
Okay.
Well, possibly because of internal issues in the field itself. Things like, theoretical disagreements causing confusion, maybe an early reliance on intuition rather than hard data.
Okay.
And also this fragmentation. The study of us got psychology here, sociology there, anthropology over there.
Losing the big picture.
Exactly, losing balance in that broad vision. So the source proposes we need to look at history, prehistory, and, interestingly, behavioral inadequacy itself.
Like studying disease to understand health.
Precisely the analogy they use.
Yeah.
We need to examine misconduct, our missteps, to really get a handle on behavior.
And looking way back to our simian and ape roots.
That's foundational, according to the source. It's about understanding the whole journey.
Okay, so let's really get into it. Why is understanding ourselves so difficult? Let's unpack the source's critique of how we've tried so far.
Well, it suggests that just, watching everyday behavior and then trying to build these big theories.
Like Freud's psychoanalysis based a lot on intuition. Or some early child development ideas that didn't hold up.
Right. The source argues that's just not enough. It's too surface level, maybe.
Which leads back to that feeling of being stuck, the impasse, all this data, but the core insights aren't getting through clearly.
And that fragmentation issue you mentioned, the source, really blames that siloing of knowledge. Psychology, sociology, anthropology, each looking at a piece but maybe not seeing the whole puzzle.
So the alternative proposed is this multi-dimensional approach. What does that actually involve?
It means stepping outside those academic boxes, pulling insights from related fields, and like we said, using history, prehistory, and especially our failures, human behavioral inadequacy as the core evidence.
So really digging into the mistakes.
The core idea is, only by looking squarely at our past, particularly where we've gone wrong, can we get the perspective needed to make misconduct understandable.
That makes a certain kind of sense. Examining the flaws to understand the whole. Which brings us to the basic kit. The brain.
Yep. The source is clear. All behavior is, fundamentally, an outward expression of what's going on in the brain.
It breaks down brain function into three main parts, reflecting our evolution.
That's right. Think of them as layers built up over time. First, there's the emotional brain,
The really old part.
the oldest. Handles those super fast automatic feelings, anger, fear, joy, disgust, triggered instantly by what we sense.
Its job is survival, basically.
Primarily, it brands experiences emotionally good, bad, avoid approach and links them to memory. It's lightning fast, largely hardwired.
Okay, then layer two.
The conditional brain. This is about long-term memory, bonding, and learned patterns. Things you learn by repetition, training.
Like memorizing facts without maybe deeply understanding them.
Yeah.
Rote learning.
Exactly. Doesn't need deep thought, just conditioning. Reward, punishment, repetition, that sort of thing.
And the third layer, the unconditionable brain.
This is the part we often think of as us. Consciousness, thinking, short-term memory, reason, introspection, planning, innovation.
And this one takes the longest to develop.
Much longer. It's what really sets us apart, evolutionarily speaking. The source highlights its slow maturation.
And the source mentions our own development, even in the womb, kind of replays this evolutionary journey.
Yeah, passing through stages resembling simpler nervous systems before the complex human brain fully forms. It's a fascinating parallel.
Consciousness itself is tricky, though, right? More than just reacting.
The source touches on that. It's not just stimulus response. Think of someone under anesthetic. They might react physically, but aren't aware.
Or locked-in syndrome.
Exactly. Aware, but unable to show it easily. Awareness is key, but hard to pin down sometimes.
So this layered brain is our hardware. And the source is going to look at some basic traits we share with other primates.
7 fundamental traits, yes. That provides the baseline. Then it gets into how nurture shapes everything.
Right, nurture. This is where the source says it gets really interesting, how our experiences shape these basic primate tendencies.
It's presented as absolutely critical. They start by looking at maternal bonding in other primates, how strong it is.
Even extending to other babies sometimes. Cradle snatching.
Yeah, and how mothers correct misbehavior, reinforcing that bond. But here's the crucial bit.
What's that?
Non-human primate mothers eventually reject their older offspring when a new baby arrives.
That's harsh.
It is. It causes trauma, distress. But the source argues it forces the older juvenile to become independent.
And humans. We don't do that.
We absolutely do not. We're unique in that long period of dependence. Our big, slow-maturing, unconditionable brain needs it, twice as long as apes, who already need twice as long as monkeys.
Wow. Okay, so after maternal care in non-humans, there's a second phase. Peer groups.
Yes, the peer group and siblings become progressively more important. And this is where rough and tumble play comes in.
What does that teach?
Reciprocity, the give and take. It forms the basis of the social contract sharing, cooperating, forming alliances.
And if they don't get that socialization?
The source mentions experiments where deprivation had disastrous effects. Animals became aggressive, couldn't play properly, couldn't mate. It messes up their social skills entirely.
Okay, so that's the non-human pattern. Now, how can this go wrong in humans? The source talks about nurtural errors, phase 1 and 2 malconditioning.
This is about problems in that very early stage. Lack of security, lack of sensitive maternal affection, if that bond is thwarted.
What happens?
The individual might become hyperreactive to danger. Their ability to form healthy bonds later can be really damaged.
And this links to other problems.
The source connects it to a whole range of things. Retreating into addiction or fetishism, becoming overly possessive, leading to theft or hoarding, or just general problems with socializing, like delinquency or antisocial behavior.
And things like aggression.
Yeah, distortions in how dominance or even hunting instincts develop can lead to disinhibited aggression.
But the source makes a strong counter-argument here, right? About nurture outweighing other factors.
A very strong one. It stresses that parental affection, encouragement, clear discipline, stability, good role models, these things can largely prevent these outcomes. It argues these factors are more important than socioeconomic status.
Okay, that's early phases. What about phase 3, nurture compulsive prejudice?
This is where our tendency towards group loyalty or herd instinct meets discrimination. It starts subtly. We naturally tend to favor our own group. This can grow, especially if there was earlier malconditioning, maybe even influenced by genetics, the source speculates.
And it shows up how?
Sometimes just as our personal biases, filtering the world to fit our beliefs, the personal equation they call it, or more obviously as prejudice. Racial, class, gender, religious, nationalistic.
And this links to conflict?
Directly. When this compulsive prejudice combines with what the source calls our inherited taste for interherd warfare, well, it becomes a powerful driver of conflict.
And the remedy?
Parental self-awareness is key. Recognizing and challenging our own prejudices. And teaching kids about behavioral history, the mistakes we've made.
So deep instincts, shaped by nurture, potential pitfalls. Let's look at how this plays out in specific types of misconduct. Addiction, crime, sexual distortions, starting with addiction.
The source sees addictive drugs as essentially messing with different brain systems, leading to breakdown, social, physical, mental.
And it has huge costs, right?
Huge. It highlights stats, like a large chunk of crime in places like the UK being drug-fueled. It also mentions genetic factors.
Like that gene affecting alcohol absorption.
Yeah, making some populations more vulnerable, like the example given about high rates in Russia. And it describes a cycle of tolerance and withdrawal.
The source gives some historical context, too.
Briefly, yeah. Opium's ancient history, alcohol being safer than water sometimes, but then distillation creating spirits, the gin craze.
Yeah.
Problems escalating.
And the U.S. prohibition example.
A classic case study, according to the source. Intended to stop alcohol problems, but it led to massive organized crime and, ironically, pushed people towards other drugs.
What about the costs of alcohol now? The source had UK figures.
Stark figures. Millions of binge drinkers, hundreds of thousands chronically addicted, tens of thousands dying yearly from related diseases, and the cost to society, billions in crime, healthcare.
Plus the personal toll.
Absolutely. The source calls it harrowing family penalties. Abuse, breakdown, mental health issues ripple through families.
Tobacco is different, though.
The source notes the health penalties are seen as severe compared to the relatively mild psychotropic effect, leading governments to actively push back against it.
And addiction links back to nurture again.
Yes, the idea that for someone who lacked that early secure bond, drugs can become a kind of substitute, something to focus on, to bond with, even though it can't reciprocate like a person.
Okay, let's broaden out to crime. The source rejects the born criminal idea.
Firmly. That's seen as outdated. For most delinquency, the primary cause identified is malconditioning during development.
How did that work?
Lack of early affection damages the moral compass. Failure to learn reciprocity hinders building fair social relationships. Later, prejudice fuels conflict.
And things like being in institutions.
Yeah, long periods in care or prison are flagged as significantly increasing the risk of reoffending. The source cites studies linking youth offending to abuse or neglect, and notes many prisoners come from broken homes.
There was that interesting UN finding mentioned. Delinquency sometimes rising with living standards.
That paradox from the 60s, yeah. It challenges a simple poverty causes crime narrative. The source suggests maybe shifts in addictive substance availability could be a factor over time.
Are there any biological causes of crime mentioned?
Very rare ones, yes. Beyond malconditioning and intoxication, it mentions specific rare heritable brain defects or pathologies found in some violent individuals. Research into specific genes or underactive brain regions related to social conscience is noted.
And trying to fix it with therapy for maladjusted youth.
The source cites studies suggesting traditional psychotherapy hasn't been very effective at preventing first-time or repeat offending in that group.
What about white-collar crime, company fraud?
Briefly mentioned, yeah. Cases like Enron are seen as another type of behavioral inadequacy, taking oversimplistic shortcuts, a failure of integrity.
Okay, shifting to sexual behavior. The source uses that memorable phrase.
Sociosexual mongrels, meaning we've inherited a mix of patterns from our primate relatives.
Not just one model.
No, elements of everything from the gibbon's nuclear family to the chimpanzee's more promiscuous approach.
And because we're close to chimps genetically, the source points to stats reflecting that.
Yeah, things like rates of non-virginity before marriage, extramarital affairs, number of partners, divorce rates. These are seen as reflecting that chimp-like influence competing with other inherited patterns, plus our inbuilt incest avoidance.
What about when sexuality becomes distorted?
Hypersexuality is discussed, sometimes hormonal, but the source also suggests it can be overcompensation for lacking early affection.
Like the Casanova example.
Exactly. His constant pursuit of conquests linked to a childhood lacking parental warmth, seeking connection through sex.
And darker distortions. Sadism, violent perversion.
These are linked back to severe failures in nurture, lack of discipline, or maybe extreme overindulgence, creating intensely selfish, antisocial traits. This is contrasted with tyranny, which is linked more to being badly beaten as a child.
The Marquis de Sade is the case study here.
Yes, portrayed as having this sexual overdrive mixed with an obsession to dominate and inflict pain, stemming from a lack of discipline.
Homosexuality and pedophilia are also touched on briefly.
Homosexuality is framed in terms of potential sexual substitution related to bonding, often facilitated by same-sex environments like prisons or monasteries. Pedophilia is noted as tending to arise in institutions where normal heterosexual activity isn't possible, and you have mature and immature males together.
And the Catholic clergy example is used prominently.
It is. The source cites historical accounts going back centuries, suggesting awareness of the problem. It uses modern conviction stats and compensation figures from various countries as evidence of this specific issue within that institutional context.
Okay, moving from individual issues to violence on a larger scale.
Right.
Institutionalized violence. The source sees this running throughout history.
Right back to our proto-human ancestors. Forming groups for hunting and scavenging, larger brains developing. This capacity also enabled organized combat.
And weapons were a game changer.
A huge catalyst. Better tools, metalworking. It fueled warfare, conquest, taking territory, and crucially, slavery on a massive scale.
Slavery as a direct outcome of war.
Often, yes. The source gives examples from Rome, the Arab slave trade, North African pirates, right up to recent times, framing it as a trophy of successful warfare.
And tyranny, how does that fit in?
Seen as a peak form of malconditioned dominance. The source links the extreme cruelty and megalomania of figures like Hitler, Stalin, Mao to childhoods marked by severe beatings. They often climb to power through manipulation, not just inheritance.
Stalin gets singled out for analysis.
As a particularly intriguing character study, his ruthless methods controlling everything, the informants, the brutality of the gulags,
Terrible condition.
horrific, forced labor, starvation linked to productivity. The source connects his methods back to his time in a seminary, spying, harsh discipline.
Dr. Shipman is mentioned again, but as different.
Yes, not political tyranny or Sade-like perversion, but an obsessional compulsion for godlike power over life and death. Still a profound behavioral inadequacy.
And just sanctioned cruelty as a state tool.
History is full of it, sadly. Rome, the medieval church, fascism, communism, dictatorships, using torture and brutality to control populations or punish dissent, even if most people find it abhorrent.
The source lists some grim methods.
It does. Compression devices, mutilation used as deterrence, widespread whipping, and execution methods often involved prolonged suffering, things like flaying, burying alive, slow strangulation, and hanging. The point isn't just death, but the deliberate, sanctioned infliction of pain.
Okay, shifting from physical force to the power of ideas, belief systems.
The source links the rise of priests to agriculture. Food surplus meant some people didn't have to farm, could specialize. Early priests often acted as mediators with the supernatural, playing on people's anxieties.
And the nature of gods changed over time.
From complex nature deities needing appeasement, the source describes a move towards simpler, tribal gods. These gods often picked favorites, demanded loyalty, and wanted rivals eliminated. Basically, tribalism projected onto the divine.
Why do people become religious, according to the source?
Several factors mention the feeling of being part of a crowd, mass veneration, the structure provided by a priesthood, practices like ritual and meditation, sublimation, even possibly a genetic predisposition to God gene is mentioned based on twin studies.
And why does it persist today?
The source suggests it offers a sense of belonging for the isolated, provides answers beyond current science for some, and fulfills an emotional need science doesn't meet.
Which inevitably leads to clashes with science.
That's the argument. Religious tenets are often fixed, immutable, while science constantly evolves. Criticizing dogma can be seen as blasphemy.
Examples given.
Galileo, under house arrest, the church banning human dissection, Archbishop Usher calculating creation date, the Scopes trial, ongoing rejection of Darwinism in parts of the U.S. today.
In the West, the source notes clergy have lost secular power.
Largely, yes. Political, military influence faded. Social welfare took over many pastoral roles.
But in the Middle East,
The source suggests Islamic clerics see secularization as a fundamental threat to doctrine and their authority.
and their response.
The source argues scapegoating is futile because secularization is driven by education, developing the rational brain, the unconditionable part, which contrasts with traditional religious schooling focused on the conditionable brain. It suggests secular reforms are needed, noting the Quran contains explicit calls to fight unbelievers. There's an irony noted, too, some traditional schools funded by oil money linked to Western economies.
Then the source talks about rule-of-thumb ideologies.
This is seen as the next step after tribal gods. Includes Judaism, Christianity, Islam, but also fascism, communism.
And the argument is they aren't truly universal.
Exactly. Their claims are mocked by their differences, and critically, their fusion with the self-interest and expansion of the groups that founded them.
And these ideologies didn't stop war.
Quite the opposite, the source argues forcefully. In their prime, they gave war its reason and enthusiastic support. War only declines when that ideological backing fades. An aggressive phase is seen as almost inevitable for monotheism and nationalism.
Any alternatives mentioned?
Some Eastern traditions, like Hinduism and Buddhism, are seen as generally more benign, focused inward. Though even Buddhism's pacifism was breached by extremists, like the Audun Shinrikyo attack.
The source comes back to some dark historical practices tied to belief. Human sacrifice.
Yeah, archaeological and historical evidence is cited. Child sacrifice, eventually banned in Israel. Enemy-eating cannibalism, often linked to absorbing the enemy's strength or spirit after conquest. Examples across many cultures and times.
Even cannibalism just for food.
Disturbingly, yes. The source cites accounts from different places and times suggesting human flesh was sometimes treated as a delicacy. Shocking, but part of the documented behavioral extremes.
And the Crusades are used as a prime example of ideology fueling war.
Absolutely. Papal bulls authorizing conquest, land hunger as a motive disguised by religion, theologians providing justification, like St. Bernard saying killing non-believers for Christ wasn't homicide.
Specific examples of brutality.
The Albigensian Crusade is detailed the massacre at Béziers, kill them all, God will know his own, the mutilation of prisoners. It shows ideology providing the rationale for extreme violence. Muhammad's unification of Arabia and the spread of Islam by force, proselytized with the sword, is also described, citing Quranic verses urging combat against unbelievers.
We've definitely covered some difficult ground, but the source does circle back to a more hopeful note, suggesting sociological progress is possible.
It does. It's not deterministic. But it requires, the source emphasizes, a real shift in attitude driven by enlightened nurture and education.
And a key part of that is overcoming our parochialism.
That's the term used, yeah. Our tendency to box ourselves into these rigid groups, race, nation, religion, language based on birth, it's seen as modern herd tribalism, fueling conflict.
So the alternative is?
Recognizing what the source calls the species bond. Understanding that our shared humanity, our interconnected survival as a species, is more fundamental than these inherited herd bonds.
And being rational and pragmatic means what, in this view?
It means consciously balancing our own self-interest with the global interest, actively rejecting prejudice, recognizing, as the source puts it, that we sink or swim together.
Are there practical steps suggested towards this fully integrated global interdependence?
Yes, things like leaders actively fostering bonds across groups, promoting common languages, building shared networks, cultural, sporting, trade, electronic, and crucially, worldwide, unbiased education systems.
Does the source see any signs we're moving that way?
It suggests we might be entering an era where old, rigid ideologies are slowly being displaced by what it calls rationalized entrepreneurial behavior. Behavior based on knowledge of our history, nurture, self-awareness, altruism, foresight.
Overpopulation gets flagged as a major challenge, too.
A critical one. The source points to the massive strain on the environment from population growth, combined with increased consumption per person. It views state-funded birth control clinics globally as basically inevitable and necessary.
And throughout this potential path forward, understanding our history keeps coming up.
It's fundamental. And the source makes a really bold claim here, that the only realistic way to stop war might be through aversion conditioning of young minds, teaching the hard lessons from our history of conflict.
Wow. We've covered a huge amount today, really diving deep into this source material. From our brain's evolution and basic instincts through nurture's power and pitfalls, the tough realities of misconduct addiction, crime, violence, the role of belief systems, and finally this vision for a future based on understanding ourselves better.
Yeah. The source lays out a powerful, if sometimes challenging case. It argues that tackling our biggest self-inflicted problems, prejudice, war, crime, really hinges on understanding our deep evolutionary roots, the impact of our upbringing, our conditioning. Biology might be static, technology races on, but our social progress, that depends entirely on changing attitudes, on enlightened policies, especially around how we raise our children.
Which leaves us, and you listening, with a pretty profound thought from the source's conclusion, doesn't it? If this path to a better future really does depend on facing our history of inadequacy, questioning our own prejudices, and choosing that shared species bond over the old herd bonds.
Then the big question becomes personal, doesn't it? What does this mean for your choices day to day? How do you navigate that tension between your own interests, your group loyalties, and this idea of a shared human destiny? Informed by this history, what small steps can you personally take towards that shift from parochialism to a more globally interdependent way of thinking and acting?